The Family by Mario Puzo, completed by Carol Gino. The narrative opens in late 15th century Rome, a city rife with lawlessness and political turmoil despite being the seat of the Holy Roman Catholic Church. Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia, the powerful vice-chancellor, walks through the streets to the home of his longtime mistress, Venazia Catanei. He is there to claim 3 of their 4 children, 7-year-old Cesare, 6-year-old Juan, and 3-year-old Lucrezia, to raise them under his direct supervision, fitting their station as children of a high-ranking church official. Venazia, a shrewd and practical woman nearing 40, understands Rodrigo's ambition and knows her children's futures are tied to his rise. Though heartbroken, she lets them go, keeping only the infant Joffre, who is soon taken as well, unable to bear separation from his siblings. On the walk away, Cesare, already showing a competitive and fiery nature, pushes Juan for holding their father's hand. A handsome, physically imposing man, radiating charisma, intervenes, emphasizing family loyalty. Lucrezia, demonstrating an early maturity and lack of jealousy, offers Cesare her place, charming her father, who lifts her onto his shoulders. The children are placed under the care of Rodrigo's widowed cousin, Adriana Orsini, in the Orsini Palace. Adriana's young son, Orso, is soon engaged to the beautiful 15-year-old Giulia Farnese, known as La Bella, who also moves in and helps care for the Borgia children. The children receive an excellent education in humanities, languages, and arts, with Cesare excelling through intelligence and competitiveness, and Lucrezia showing great promise and virtue, particularly loving poetry and the arts. Rodrigo, despite church rules, openly acknowledges his children, a departure from the hypocrisy common among clergy. During a special family meal at the Vatican, young Juan becomes violently ill after sipping wine intended for his father. Rodrigo realizes it's poison. His trusted advisor, Duarte Brandão, tall, elegant, but known for his wrath when crossed, is ordered to find the culprit among the staff by offering them pure wine. Only the guilty one, choked by fear, will refuse. A kitchen boy, formerly employed by the rival Malatesta family of Rimini, is identified. Rodrigo orders the boy forced to drink the poisoned wine and sent back to Gaspare Malatesta, the Lion of Rimini, as a deadly message. Juan lies near death for weeks, nursed at the Vatican. Rodrigo prays fervently for his recovery, vowing great service to the church. During this time, Rodrigo realizes his family needs more than divine protection. He sends for his nephew from Spain, Miguel Corello, known as Don Michelotto. Michelotto, a fiercely loyal man of 21, bears a scarred face from defending his mother's house as a youth, giving him a constant grimace, but his eyes radiate fairness and mercy. He becomes the family's dedicated protector, a constant shadow ensuring their safety. As the children grow, Rodrigo spends much time with them, discussing politics, religion, and diplomacy, especially with Cesare and Juan. Juan remains indulged and spoiled, while Cesare shows great aptitude, though his true passion lies in military strategy. Rodrigo also grows fond of the beautiful Giulia Farnese. He presides over her marriage to young Orso Orsini, finding himself deeply attracted to the young bride. Soon, Orso is sent away for military training, and Giulia willingly becomes Cardinal Borgia's mistress. Cesare is sent to study law and theology at Perugia and Pisa, excelling academically but longing for a soldier's life. Juan, less studious, is destined for a military career. Joffre, the youngest, remains somewhat distant from his father. Pope Innocent VIII lies dying, leaving the papal treasury empty and the church vulnerable. The cardinals prepare for the conclave to elect a new pope, a process fraught with political maneuvering and bribery. The main contenders are Ascanio Sforza of Milan, Cardinal Cibo of Venice, Giuliano della Rovera of Naples, and Rodrigo Borgia. Rodrigo, despite his long service, is hampered by his Spanish heritage. The conclave begins in the Sistine Chapel under strict isolation. After initial deadlocks between Sforza and della Rovere, intense negotiations, promises of benefices, and rumored bribes occur in secret. Finally, on August 11th, 1492, white smoke signals a decision. Rodrigo Borgia is elected Pope, taking the name Alexander VI. As Pope Alexander VI, his first act is to restore order in Rome, swiftly executing criminals and razing their houses, which quickly pacifies the city. His larger goals are to build a papal army to control the papal states and secure his children's fortunes. He immediately nominates his 17-year-old son, Cesare, as a cardinal, despite Cesare's youth and preference for a military life. Cesare, studying at Pisa, receives the news with mixed feelings, but celebrates with his friends, Gio Medici, already a young cardinal, and Tila Baglioni, heir to Perugia. Before Cesare leaves for Rome, the three friends travel to Perugia for the wedding of Tila's cousin. The city, ruled by the formidable Duchess Atalanta Baglioni, is festive. During the celebrations, Cesare excels in wrestling matches. That night, screams erupt from the castle. Cesare investigates cautiously and discovers the bride and groom brutally murdered in their chamber by the Duchess's own son, Netto, who claims they were plotting against her. Netto intends to depose his mother and also kill Tila. Cesare warns Tila, and they escape the castle with Gio. Cesare helps Tila rally supporters in the city. At dawn, Tila confronts and kills Netto in the public square, brutally executing Netto's captured troops and becoming the new tyrant of Perugia. Cesare, disturbed but fascinated by the swift transformation and brutality, relates the story to his father in Rome. Alexander seems more amused than horrified, remarking on the strange relationship between faith and violence. Alexander, understanding the importance of appearances, ensures the Vatican reflects heavenly splendor to impress nobles and commoners alike. He then informs his son Juan that he will inherit the title Duke of Gandia from his deceased half-brother, Pedro Luis, and will marry Pedro's betrothed, Maria Enriquez, cousin to King Ferdinand of Spain, cementing an alliance with the powerful Spanish monarchy. Juan, more concerned with riches than responsibility, accepts sullenly. Cesare's ordination as cardinal is a grand affair attended by Italy's nobility, including Ludovico Sforza, Il Moro, and his brother Cardinal Ascanio Sforza, now Alexander's vice-chancellor, the d'Este family, Piero Medici of Florence, rival Roman families Orsini and Colonna, Duke Guido Feltre of Urbino, and Alexander's bitter enemy, Cardinal Giuliano della Rovere. Della Rovere, ambitious and resentful of Alexander's papacy, already plots against him. During the ceremony, as Alexander places the red hat on Cesare's head, the imposing figure of the new cardinal impresses the congregation. Unseen in the back, Gaspare Malatesta, the Lion of Rimini, sits plotting revenge for the death of his kitchen boy. Don Michelotto silently slips behind him and garrotes him, leaving his body slumped in the pew as the procession exits. Cardinal della Rovere, obsessed with vengeance, retreats to his fortress in Ostia. He believes Alexander immoral and resents his nepotism and extravagance. Della Rovere begins writing to King Charles VIII of France, urging him to invade Italy and depose Alexander by convening a general council, an archaic body once used to check papal power. Alexander, needing Milan's support, arranges the betrothal of his 13-year-old daughter Lucrezia to the recently widowed Giovanni Sforza, Duke of Pesaro and nephew of Il Moro. Lucrezia is initially devastated at the thought of marriage and leaving her father, but Alexander explains the political necessity. Concerned about Lucrezia's loyalty after marriage, Alexander asks his sons Cesare and Juan which of them will initiate her into the physical aspects of marriage to ensure her primary bond remains with the family. Juan refuses contemptuously. Lucrezia, surprisingly assertive, demands the choice and selects Cesare, Finding Juan repugnant, she asks her father to witness the act. In a private chamber, Alexander watches as Cesare, guided initially by the Pope, makes love to Lucrezia. The experience is intensely emotional for all three. Alexander is shaken by his own response and the potential spiritual peril, recognizing the depth of the bond he has forged, but also the danger it poses, particularly to Cesare. Giovanni Sforza arrives in Rome for the wedding, greeted by a grand procession organized by Alexander. Lucrezia watches from her balcony, observing her future husband, shorter and stockier than her brothers, with a grim expression. Cesare finds Giovanni boorish and avoids him. Juan, however, befriends the Duke, inviting him and Prince Cem, a Turkish prince held hostage at the Vatican for political and financial reasons, for a night of revelry and whoring in Rome, during which Juan mistreats a favorite prostitute, Avellona. The wedding ceremony takes place in the Vatican. Lucrezia, beautiful but anxious, feels dread as she kneels beside Giovanni. Cesare attends but remains distant. At the reception, Lucrezia finds her husband boorish and gluttonous. She misses her mother, Vanozza, who is excluded now that Giulia Farnese is the Pope's official mistress. Later, Lucrezia begs her father to delay the consummation, but he insists. Reluctantly, Lucrezia proceeds to the bridal chamber with Giovanni. The Pope, Cardinal Ascanio Sforza, and Cardinal Farnese witness the act. Lucrezia endures it numbly, finding Giovanni repulsive. The next morning, Cesare, deeply upset, rides off into the country alone. When he returns, he and Lucrezia quarrel briefly over their respective unwanted roles before reconciling, Cesare promising they will always have each other. In Milan, Ludovico Sforza, Il Moro, ruling as regent, faces a threat from King Ferrante of Naples. Ferrante's granddaughter, Avia, married Ludovico's powerless nephew, the rightful Duke Gian. Avia complains to Ferrante about being denied her status, prompting the ruthless Neapolitan king to threaten Milan. Fearing Ferrante, Il Moro makes a fateful decision. Learning of French King Charles VIII's plans to invade Italy and claim the Neapolitan crown, Il Moro invites Charles and his army passage through Milan. At the Vatican, Pope Alexander learns of Il Moro's dangerous move and King Ferrante's subsequent anger at the Pope's perceived alliance with Milan due to Lucrezia's marriage. Ferrante appeals to his cousin, King Ferdinand of Spain. Alexander, advised by Duarte Brandão, decides to appease Ferrante with another marital alliance, offering his youngest son, Joffre, aged 12, to Ferrante's 16-year-old illegitimate granddaughter, Sanzia of Aragon. Meanwhile, King Ferdinand informs Alexander of treachery involving Cardinal della Rovere, Virginio Orsini, Adriana's brother-in-law, and Cardinal Cibo, who secretly sold strategic castles near Rome to Orsini, potentially threatening the city's safety. Ferdinand mediates and an agreement is reached. Orsini keeps the castles, but pays a hefty annual tax to the Vatican. Soon after the proxy marriage of Joffre and Sanzia, King Ferrante dies. His less capable son, Massino, inherits the throne but needs the Pope's official confirmation. King Charles of France also demands the Neapolitan crown and threatens Alexander. Facing pressure from both sides and fearing a French invasion that could depose him, Alexander decides he needs Naples as an ally. He quickly crowns Massino king. 4 days later, 12-year-old Joffre marries 16-year-old Sancha in Naples. The spirited Sancha is initially humiliated by her child groom, but is somewhat mollified by the lavish gifts he brings. The marriage is consummated under witness. Alexander, seeking Spain's support against the potential French threat, arbitrates a dispute between Spain and Portugal over lands in the New World. In the famous papal bull Inter Caetera, he draws a line on the map, dividing the newly discovered territories, favoring Spain significantly. This diplomatic success strengthens his ties with King Ferdinand and allows Juan Borgia's marriage to Maria Enriquez in Spain to proceed. Alexander enjoys a brief respite with his mistress, Julia Farnese. An outbreak of plague in Rome forces Alexander to send Lucrezia to Pesaro for safety, accompanied by Adriana and Julia. Lucrezia is distraught at leaving Rome and her father. On arrival in Pesaro, after a difficult journey, Lucrezia falls ill with fever, but insists on greeting her subjects the next day. She finds Pesaro beautiful, but remains lonely, missing Cesare deeply. They had agreed to meet secretly at Silver Lake, halfway between Rome and Pesaro. Meanwhile, King Charles of France, influenced by his astrologer, Simon of Pavia, prepares his invasion. Duarte Brandão learns of this and devises a plan. He secretly travels to meet Simon, bribing him with a massive sum, 20,000 ducats, to ensure a favorable astrological reading for the Pope. Alexander, meanwhile, is infuriated when Julia Farnese disobeys his orders to return directly to Rome from Pesaro, instead visiting family. His jealousy and longing consume him until Julia is finally forced to return by her husband, Orso, citing the danger from the advancing French army. King Charles's army marches into Italy, encouraged by Cardinal della Rovere, facing betrayal from Virginio Orsini, who defects to the French, and the capture of Julia and Adriana by French cavalry, who are quickly ransomed for 3,000 ducats at Charles's chivalrous command. Alexander realizes resistance is futile. He retreats with Cesare and his household into the heavily fortified Castel Sant'Angelo. He allows Charles's army safe passage through Rome, treating the king with lavish hospitality to avoid the city being sacked. Despite della Rovere's urging, Charles does not convene a general council to depose Alexander. Instead, impressed by Alexander's diplomacy and perhaps influenced by Simon of Pavia's reading, Charles seeks an audience. They negotiate. Alexander grants Charles free passage to Naples and agrees to crown him king if he conquers it, handing over Cesare and Prince Gem as hostages. In return, Charles swears obedience to Alexander as the true pope. Cesare reluctantly accepts his role as hostage. Alexander reassures him of his importance to the family's future. Before leaving, Cesare visits Noni, his father's old wet nurse, a reputed herbalist living outside Rome. She gives him a powder to induce sleep without harm. She also warns him, "There is death in your house, someone young." Cesare rides with the French army towards Naples. He observes their military tactics, but knows his father secretly opposes French control of Naples and is likely forming a holy league against them. Realizing his hostage status paralyzes his father, Cesare plots his escape. He drugs his guards using Noni's powder, incapacitates another, and flees back to Rome on horseback. Alexander is overjoyed at his return, confessing the torment Cesare's captivity caused him. King Charles successfully occupies Naples as King Massino flees. Charles is too preoccupied with his victory to worry excessively about Cesare's escape. Alexander, now free to act, solidifies the Holy League with Milan, no longer threatened by Naples, Venice, and Spain. They plan to trap the French army between forces moving north from Naples and south from Milan and Venice. Fearing being caught, Charles hastily retreats from Naples, battling his way through Italy and back over the Alps to France, his grand ambitions thwarted. With Rome quiet, Alexander organizes a family gathering at Silver Lake. Lucrezia comes from Pesaro, Juan from Spain without his wife, and Joffre and Sansia from Naples. Alexander enjoys hunting, despite it being forbidden for popes. During one hunt, Juan accidentally kills one of Cesare's prize greyhounds. deepening Cesare's resentment. Later, Lucrezia confides in Cesare about her unhappiness with Giovanni Sforza. Cesare promises to speak to their father about an annulment. That same evening, Juan secretly seduces Sansia in the old hunting lodge. At the banquet, Juan and Sansia sing a duet, raising Cesare's suspicions about Joffre's awareness. Alexander discourses on good and evil, power and faith. Later, Joffre confronts Sansia about Juan. Sansia dismisses it. But Joffre witnesses their passionate parting embrace. Joffre condemns Juan in his heart. Cesare discusses Lucrezia's marriage with Alexander, who agrees an annulment is politically expedient, and suggests Alfonso of Aragon, Sansia's brother, as a better match. Alexander also speaks of unifying the Papal States and emphasizes the importance of trusting only Mitelato and Duarte Brandão, revealing Duarte's likely past as Sir Edward Brampton, an English knight. Betrayed by Virginio Orsini during the French invasion, Alexander seeks revenge on the Orsini family. He excommunicates them and recalls Juan from Spain to lead the papal army against their holdings, appointing the Duke of Urbino, Guido Feltre, as the actual commander. Cesare is furious, believing Juan incompetent and himself far better suited for command. But Alexander insists a Borgia must appear to lead. The initial campaign is deceptively easy, but then the Orsini, aided by forces under Vito Vitelli, called upon by Della Rovere, defeat the papal army at Soriano. Feltre is captured. Juan escapes with minor injury. Alexander, pressured by other states, makes peace, returning the castles for 50,000 ducats, which Juan demands and receives as compensation for his embarrassment. Juan then insists on leading the recapture of Ostia from the remaining French garrison. Alexander agrees, but secretly arranges for the renowned Spanish general Gonsalvo de Cordoba to command the actual battle. Juan rides out ceremoniously, plays no part in de Cordoba's swift victory, and rides back into Rome a supposed hero. At a ball celebrating the victory, de Cordoba furiously complains to Cesare about Juan taking credit, even commissioning a medal as victor of Ostia. Later, Cesare observes Joffre speaking intensely with de Cordoba and Vanni Orsini in the courtyard, noticing Joffre's uncharacteristic ferocity. Lucrezia, back in Rome for Easter, receives a message that Giovanni Sforza wants her to return to Pesaro immediately. Cesare arrives with news that Alexander has decided on an annulment and plans for Giovanni to vanish. Lucrezia, horrified at the thought of murder, refuses to participate. Cesare leaves angrily. Lucrezia secretly warns Giovanni's chamberlain, who relays the message. Giovanni flees Rome, riding his horse to death to reach Pesaro. Alexander proceeds with the annulment on grounds of impotence. Lucrezia, realizing this claim will be complicated by her secret pregnancy by Cesare, retreats to the convent of San Sisto. Alexander is enraged, but sends the young page Perato as a messenger. Perato and Lucrezia become close friends. Lucrezia confesses her pregnancy to Perato, who gallantly offers to claim paternity to protect her and Cesare from charges of incest. Alexander negotiates Lucrezia's divorce from Giovanni Sforza, using Cesare's threat of a public test of Giovanni's potency to force his agreement. Lucrezia appears before the Roman Rota, heavily pregnant but looking innocent, and successfully pleads her case, being declared femina intacta. Perato informs the Pope he is the father. Alexander, surprisingly calm, instructs him to secrecy. Perato also tells Cesare, who warns him to hold. Alexander issues secret papal bulls, one naming himself the father, Infans Romanos, another naming Cesare. The latter is intended for public use. Lucrezia gives birth to a healthy boy, Giovanni Borgia, who is secretly taken to Cesare's apartments. Alexander, needing to tie up loose ends, orders Don Michelato to eliminate Perato. Michelato obtains a fast-acting poison from Noni, and arranges for Perotto to be poisoned in a tavern. Cesare, having crowned the king of Naples, meets Lucrezia at Silver Lake. She tells him Perotto is dead, murdered by their father. Cesare feels remorse. Lucrezia reveals the baby looks like both of them. Cesare vows to renounce the cardinalate. He then visits Florence in disguise to assess the threat from Savonarola, whose fiery sermons denounce the Pope. He meets Niccolò Machiavelli, who shares his insights on Florentine politics and Savonarola's power. Cesare formally requests release from his cardinal vows before the consistory. Despite the unprecedented nature of the request, the Pope argues it's for the good of Cesare's soul and the Church's finances, as his benefices revert, and the cardinals agree. Cesare is free. Alexander, though grieving the loss of his dream of a Borgia pope, appoints Cesare captain general. Alexander is approached by the French ambassador, the Amboise. The French King Charles VIII has died, and the new king, Louis XII, wants an annulment from his wife Jeanne to marry Charles's widow, Anne of Brittany. Louis claims both Naples and Milan. Alexander sees an opportunity. He will grant the dispensation if Louis helps secure Cesare a royal bride, preferably Princess Rosetta of Naples. Cesare, waiting restlessly, grows distant from Lucrezia, who is happily married to Alfonso of Aragon and pregnant again. Cesare contracts syphilis from encounters with courtesans, but recovers. He finally confronts Lucrezia, hurt by her shifting affections. She explains her love for Alfonso is different, blessed, unlike their forbidden love. Cesare feels betrayed, but eventually accepts it, focusing on his future. He receives an invitation from King Louis XII to visit France. Alexander provides the papal dispensation for Louis and the cardinal's hat for d'Amboise, instructing Cesare to seek the marriage alliance with Rosetta. Cesare travels to France with extravagant pomp, meeting Cardinal della Rovere, now outwardly reconciled with the Pope, who ensures a grand reception. Cesare's ostentatious display, however, is met with contempt by the parsimonious French court, though King Louis receives him warmly. Louis grants Cesare the Duchy of Valentinois. Cesare meets Princess Rosetta, who politely but firmly refuses him, confessing her love for another. Cesare respects her honesty. King Louis, embarrassed, grants Cesare more titles and estates, and promises to find another suitable French bride. Back in Rome, Alexander is frustrated by the failure of the Neapolitan match. Cesare eventually finds a suitable bride in Charlotte d'Albret, sister of the King of Navarre. Alexander, facing hostility from Spain, who believed Cesare murdered Juan, and needing French military support for Cesare's campaigns, reluctantly agrees to the French alliance, knowing it jeopardizes Lucrezia's marriage to Alfonso. Cesare marries Charlotte and spends happy months with her in the Loire Valley, but his heart still longs for Lucrezia. Charlotte becomes pregnant. Cesare receives orders from Alexander to return to Rome to resume his campaign. He leaves Charlotte and their unborn child in France. Alexander, unable to bear Lucrezia's unhappiness after Alfonso fled to Naples, appoints her governor of Nepi to distract her. Joffre accompanies her, but Sancha is forbidden, infuriating her. The Pope threatens Sancha, who vows revenge. Lucrezia governs Nepi well. Alexander eventually persuades Alfonso to rejoin Lucrezia, granting them Nepi. Lucrezia becomes pregnant again. Cesare resumes his campaign, targeting Pesaro. Giovanni Sforza flees. Rimini, the Malatesta, flee, and Faenza. Faenza, ruled by the beloved Astore Manfredi, resists fiercely, using a clever psychological trick devised by Leonardo da Vinci involving a fake siege tower. Cesare breaches the walls and takes the city. Young Astore Manfredi joins Cesare's staff. Cesare marches towards Bologna, but avoids attacking the French-protected city, instead securing the strategic Castel Bolognese through negotiation with Giovanni Bentivoglio. During celebrations, Astore confesses his love for Cesare, who gently rejects him. Astorre leaves for Rome. Cesare threatens Florence, but settles for a payment and alliance. He captures Piombino, and with Duarte Brandao's unexpected naval expertise, conquers the island of Elba. Cardinals della Rovere and Ascanio Sforza secretly meet, plotting Alexander's downfall, hoping della Rovere will become the next pope. Alexander negotiates Lucrezia's third marriage, this time to Alfonso de Este, heir to the powerful Duke Ercole of Ferrara. Despite the Borgia reputation, Duke Ercole agrees, influenced by potential political advantages and French pressure, securing a huge dowry and tax exemption. The Roman poet Filofila publishes scandalous verses about the Borgias. Cesare has him abducted and brutally mutilated by Michelotto. Lucrezia and Cesare meet at Silver Lake before her departure for Ferrara. She expresses concern over his increasing ruthlessness. He defends his actions as necessary. They make love one last time. Lucrezia travels to Ferrara in a magnificent procession. Duke Ercole immediately shows his parsimony and warns Lucrezia about infidelity by showing her the bloodstains where a previous duke executed his unfaithful wife. Lucrezia becomes pregnant, but falls gravely ill with malaria. Cesare rushes to her side in disguise, threatening Duke Ercole to ensure her recovery. Lucrezia recovers, but loses the child. She dedicates herself to governing wisely and virtuously in Ferrara. Alexander imprisons Sancha in the Castel Sant'Angelo dungeons to pressure Naples into accepting French claims. Joffre is distraught. Sancha is brutally raped by guards and falls into a catatonic state. Cesare conquers Urbino through surprise, driving out Guido Feltra, then takes Camerino. Machiavelli observes Cesare's rise and warns Florence of his power, but also predicts his downfall due to the enemies he's making, particularly among his own treacherous condottieri, Vitelli, Orsini, etc. The condottieri conspire against Cesare at Magione. Machiavelli warns Cesare. Cesare strategically withdraws troops, raises new forces, and feigns reconciliation with the conspirators. Alexander has Cardinal Antonio Orsini poisoned. Cesare lures the treacherous condottieri, Vitelli, Paolo and Franco Orsini, Oliver da Fermo, into a trap at Senigallia and has Michelotto strangle them. Cesare returns to Rome a hero, but struggles with his scarred face and strained relationship with Lucrezia. He releases Caterina Sforza after she signs over her lands. Joffre, aided by Vanni Orsini, plots revenge. Alexander arranges a celebratory banquet at Cardinal Coroneto's villa. Cesare's amulet disappears. At the banquet, Joffre arranges a lewd display involving naked courtesans and golden chestnuts, disgusting Duke Ercole de Este. Later that night, both Alexander and Cesare fall violently ill after the meal. Alexander weakens rapidly. On his deathbed, attended by Cesare, he confesses his regrets, particularly regarding manipulating Cesare and Lucrezia's relationship, and acknowledges Joffre's virtue too late. Joffre refuses forgiveness. Alexander dies, his body swelling grotesquely. Riots erupt in Rome against the Spanish. Cesare is too ill to consolidate power. His enemies reclaim territories. The College of Cardinals forces all troops from Rome. Sancia dies in the dungeons. The brief papacy of Pius III is followed by the election of Cesare's enemy, Giuliano della Rovere, as Pope Julius II. Julius initially feigns reconciliation with Cesare, but soon demands the surrender of his remaining castles. Cesare, seeking Spanish help in Naples from Gonsalvo de Córdoba, is betrayed by him on orders from Ferdinand and Isabella, influenced by Juan's widow. Cesare is arrested, shipped to Spain in a coffin, and imprisoned in a castle tower. After months of degrading imprisonment, Cesare is rescued by Duarte Brandão, who bribes the guards and arranges his escape. Duarte reveals his past as Sir Edward Brampton and sails for potential amnesty in England. Cesare rides north to Navarre, seeking refuge with his brother-in-law, King John. John welcomes him warmly and makes him commander of the royal army. Cesare finds peace and plans to send for Charlotte and their daughter, Louise. However, King John is plagued by the rebellious Count de Beaumont. Cesare insists on leading the attack against Beaumont's castle at Viana. During the assault, Cesare's cavalry betrays him, refusing to charge. Undeterred, Cesare charges the breach alone, fighting bravely, but is overwhelmed and killed. In the epilogue, Cesare's ashes are initially interred in Rome, but Lucrezia has Michelotto steal them. She takes the urn to Silver Lake, the place of their happiest childhood memories and complex adult encounters. Reflecting on her life, her father, and her brother, she acknowledges their flaws, but also remembers their love, finding a measure of peace and resolve to live a life of virtue and mercy. She scatters Cesare's ashes into the lake at dusk. Penitents nearby see her, recognizing her as Lucrezia d'Este, the good and merciful Duchess of Ferrara. If you enjoyed this book breakdown, please consider liking this video and subscribing to get notified when we post our next book.